have Gary Vickers from EMCO, Josh Lawson from Scotiabank, Michael Kozar from Federated Cooperatives Limited, Kenneth Coates from Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy, Wayne Brownlee from Potash Corp, and Carolyn Tastat from P&G. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time, and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university, and we ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. So competitors, you may begin when you're ready.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank you all for being here with us this morning. My name is Christian, and these are my colleagues Manasi and Catherine. And together we are KMC Consulting. And we are very excited to be here to talk to you today about your organization, Granite Aviation Solutions, and how you've positioned yourself in the market, in a very lucrative market, and how you're using that to expand to new levels through new suppliers. I know that you're pressed for time. You have to make a decision very shortly that will deeply affect your organization on an international scale and your suppliers as well. And I'm going to discuss that deeply, but I feel it's important to do a thorough analysis of the macro environment and where you've positioned yourself and your company and how you can really leverage that and leverage the power of your suppliers to really grow your organization and make sure you're making decisions that not only mitigate your risk but maximize your profitability. So with that, I'm going to move into our agenda. We are going to identify the opportunity for you here today. From there, we are going to move into the analysis, and that analysis is going to showcase the options we've provided. We have selected one, that is our recommendation, and we will provide an implementation on how to pursue that recommendation, followed by our contingency, and finally, keys to success. So moving further into our analysis, we've identified the opportunity as managing risk and the potential of these RFPs, these proposals. Your organization has a supplier, Flight, that has very lucrative technology that could really change the entire landscape of the aviation industry. And they're looking to expand and be a provider for new airlines in 3 different countries, Oman, Angola, and Burundi. But it's important because you are the intermediary that will be facilitating this transaction. And it has just become even more important because Flight has shifted a lot of the risk in your direction as they're going to sell the entire property to you. Which is why it's important that this is the primary goal, is managing risk. We've also identified the secondary goal as securing a long-term contract with Flight. As I mentioned, they have very proprietary technology that when leveraged properly through the use of analysis and value-added analysis that they can sell back to different companies, it could be a huge growth opportunity. And because they've offered exclusive distribution to you, this is something that we find very important and we want to discuss with you today. So looking at our macro analysis, on the political side, as I mentioned these countries, there is a lot of instability in the Middle East right now. And a lot of these firms that want to buy these airlines from you are state-owned. And what this means is it can lead to inefficiencies, but at the same time, it could lead to exploiting a higher purchase price because it's a state-owned company. In terms of economics, the falling commodity prices and lower investment in emerging markets is something we really need to pay attention to here, just because of these countries are so heavily reliant on commodities, mainly oil exports, which is, you'll see further through our recommendation, this plays an important part, especially for countries that have questionable monetary policy and are experiencing extremely high inflation rates, due to the decline in commodities, especially countries that rely heavily on agriculture exports too. This plays a huge decision, and again, I stress the importance of how an entire analysis is very important in making this recommendation. The technological shift to value-added service, the airline industry in general is, well, the margins are very thin, but we feel that this could revolutionize the exclusive distribution through flight, could really improve the industry and how you sell back analytics. And of course, legal. Some of the risks facing you with this deal is your questions about, is this bribery? And we've just taken a look at that too through our recommendation. So looking more on the industry level, now this is important because we're looking through the eyes of Granite Aviation Solutions, which is an intermediary between suppliers and the actual airlines. So we feel that the buyer power is moderate. There's a few key players. Supplier power is high just because of the fact that you are an intermediary. They could sell directly to the airlines. The threat of new entrants is quite high. There's a minimal capital investment in becoming this intermediary. The threat of substitutes, we feel, is fairly low just because of the service you offer of integrating systems and hardware for airlines. And ultimately, the industry rivalry is fairly moderate. This is an important one because some of your direct competitors are offsprings of Boeing, which is a very vertically integrated company. So we took this into account when recommending the options for you. So with that, I'm going to pass the analysis on to my colleague Manasi.
Thank you, Christian. So what I'm going to do now is to take a look at your company and look at its strengths and weaknesses and see how these can be used to leverage the opportunities that are presented to your company, as well as mitigating the threats that are posed to you. So the number one asset of your company is the superior customer service. It clearly states that you take only 3 days where competitors are taking up to 2 weeks to answer some of the questions that your customers might have. You also have experienced senior managers that put in proposal, so the quality of the proposals are high. So overall, those core strengths make your company stand out quite a bit. However, we did find that you do have a brand that is not established, and the reason is just the way the industry works. So for instance, like it mentions that you, once you have the, put in the machinery or the equipment, you kind of have to go with it, because if you change, you have to then change manuals, you have to retrain thousands of pilots, which would mean huge initial costs upon installing new systems, which is why it's kind of hard to get that in for people to try your product out. The other threat that your company faces is that of corruption, especially if you're going into markets that are not, if you're going into sort of emerging markets and the countries that you're targeting right now. However, those are also the good places to get that initial in, to get these people to try your product, because they don't have any established contracts or any established fleet as of now. This brings us to the opportunity of entering the low-cost carriers market, which is the primary market for the countries that regions that you're targeting, as well as the exclusive distribution opportunity with Flight, because that is what they are offering you. And together, combined, I think this is we think that this is a very strong decision. Whatever is going to happen is going to change the fate of your company for a while. So moving on, we came up with 3 options for you. The first one was to submit RFP for 2 airlines, specifically Angola and Oman, and we will talk about why we reached those options in a little bit. The second option we have was to submit the RFP for all airlines, the way they are proposing. And the third one is to not submit RFP at all. to weigh these options, we created a decision matrix. It is a weighted decision matrix. We thought that the risk averse was the most important one because we are, again, just like we saw in the macro analysis, dealing with regions where corruption exists, some form of, and there could be potential lawsuits, there could be potential trouble. So we don't want you to take that risks, which is why risk averse was the highest weighted of them all. But at the same time, you are in a position where it would be great to grow your company because you have the opportunity, and ROI will be one of the deciding factors for this one. So we did our calculations, and the 2 airlines RFP option came out on top. So our recommendation is to submit RFPs for Angola and Oman. Now, there are 2 aspects to this strategy. First of all, we ensure that we buy the EDC insurance, which is going to cost you 2.5% of the total investment that you're doing. So we have to make sure we do that because of the risks in place. Also, we need to make sure that there is an exit clause in the RFP. So what we are recommending is essentially you, because they have this proposition in front of you, and you have to respond right away. We are recommending that you also put in a clause there saying that should your lawyers say that this is not a good idea, that you can cancel the agreement, and that's just to cover your bases. So we also think that if there is no harm in accepting the proposition as of now, because there is a legal clause that can protect you. Based on the information that we have received, the extra amounts that they're asking for are not exactly bribery, because the loan rewarder advantage, as the clause says, is if it's done in good faith and if it's done to cover your reasonable expenses, then it's not really a bribe. And so we believe that that could cover you. However, should there be any issues with, and lawyers say no, there's always that exit clause. So because the timelines are tight, we came up with an importance urgency matrix just to make sure that our priorities are straight. So the one with the highest importance and the highest urgency is that we need to submit this RFP. And it needs to include the exit clause. Also, in terms of high importance and low urgency, we need to get those lawyers, get the lawyer consultation on what we're doing, as well as acquire EDC insurance, which is going to help you in case of any issues. Now that we know what we're doing or what our priorities are, we need to then look at the timeline of how we can execute it. And to talk to you about that, I'll invite Catherine right here.
Thank you, Manasi. So as my colleagues explained to you earlier, we understand that your company is in a dire position. You have exactly 3 hours to make this decision on whether or not you're going to submit the proposal to work with these companies or not. You don't have a whole lot of time to think or consult with individuals. And that's why we suggest to you that immediately you should send in this proposal with the said clause at the back end of it that says that if your legal team, after consultation, says that it is in fact bribery, even though the legal act would insinuate that you would be protected by it, you still want to ask your legal team for it. And if you submit the proposal on time, you still have that window to actually gain those companies as clients in the future. And also, Flight has propositioned you to, instead of working as a middleman, essentially sell and service their products for them. And we think that that is a great opportunity for your company to take on, because you can earn more revenue off of that as well with less expenditure. You'll get more of a return on your investment if you take this aspect from them. as I'll talk about in a little bit. And those two items need to be dealt with immediately in the next 3 hours. Need to iron out those aspects. Now, within the next month, we suggest that you consult with your lawyers. It's not exactly detrimental if it takes a few weeks for this for the lawyers to look at the case, because there is a clause in your proposal that you'll send back to these companies. And then for the next 3 months, we suggest that you work with the insurance company to get that 2.5% coverage on all of the investment. And then moving forward into the next 3 months, that would be the training aspect, because as you are going to take over, if you follow through with this suggestion, to take over the installation and the maintenance aspect of Flyte's product, you'll still have to train the maintenance crews to do this. And then as you move into the latter portion of the year, we suggest that as you get more and more products being purchased and more airlines, that you open up a physical location so that you can better service these companies as you move forward. So I'll go into a little bit more depth with it. We suggest that you send in your proposal to Omani Vacations and Ongala Skies. The reason why we have picked 2 for you instead of 3 is due to the inconsistencies and the thought that looking at the aspect, we assumed that the second company actually might be along the lines of bribery a little bit more, whereas the fee was going towards government officials to push forward permits. And we felt that was a little bit on the erring on the side that Flyte didn't want to go with their products. So also accepting that Flyte proposal, it is a 3-year contract with them to become the sole distributors of their product. And this is going to move you forward in the industry, and as I explained to you the financials as we move forward, it's going to be quite beneficial to your company to do this. Also, working with Export Development Canada Insurance, you're going to get that 2.5% of your contract, and it's going to cost about $216,000. But as I explain as we go forward on what your revenues could be, it's a very, very small fee to ensure that you get this aspect. Now in the clause, the proposal that you send forward to these 2 companies, we urge you to actually submit a line on there asking them to be the ones who provide the individuals who you'll train for the maintenance. The reason behind this is because you don't have to hire individuals and know that they have previous experience with the airplanes that these companies are using. And for that matter, these individuals who work for those companies are just going to be better trained, and they can ask for better pay as well from their companies on the other end. So it's beneficial for everyone involved. And lastly, as I stated, looking into a physical location, and that's farther off into the spectrum, so we'll touch less on that one. Now, as I touch a little bit on the financials, the expected revenues, keep in mind that we're looking into the 3rd quarter of 3 years in. It's going to be an added up amount of $8.625 million for your company. That's a lot of money, especially seeing as right now your company has a revenue of $2.2 million. So as you can see, by accepting this contract with Flyte and moving forward with these 2 companies, you're going to very much so benefit your company. All of that for an investment of $250,000 up front, working with Flyte so that you can be their sole distributor of this product. We have also calculated some expenses in there, as including the flights of your consultants flying over there and dealing with the products, to be roughly in the $155,000 market. And this leaves your company with an ROI of 19.7%, which is very reasonable, and as you can see from the revenues, looks very good for your company. To go more into depth on how the products are going to work for your company, you start off in the first year with 30 units being sold. Doesn't seem like a lot, but keep in mind you are in the last quarter of the year. And as you move forward into 2019, it's going to be 1,500 units being sold. Your company gets $5,000 off of every unit that is put in, installed, and maintained. Leaves your company with the added up amount of approximately $8.6 million that I said to you earlier. Now, if what we've explained to you doesn't work out the way that we have planned out, I have my colleague Christian to explain to you the contingencies.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. So just looking into the contingencies, we feel there's two things that could really adversely affect your company from this stage. Number one is that possibility of the bribery instigations, but we feel that this is a low probability of occurrence just based on the evidence we provided and any possible possibility of it happening with Burundi. We remove that country as some that you should target because we want to keep your risk low. In the case it does happen, we feel that a legal lawsuit could happen, but based on the contract that says you were operating in good faith, we feel that it's low risk. Also, the EDC insurance, there's a possibility it's denied. This is a possible occurrence, and we feel that discussing with your shareholders whether they want to move forward. Again, $250,000 is a minimal investment based on the returns that Catherine has showed you. So just looking at our keys to success, we fully believe that securing that contract and acquiring that insurance is going to help you move into these countries and really build up that relationship with FLYHT, which will end in prosperity. Thank you. Open for questions.
Presenters, judges.
Just ask, if EDC denies the insurance, what does that say about your whole business proposition? Under what grounds would they deny it, and how much concern?
We feel the business proposition is very beneficial. Just when I was really iterating what FLYHT does and how they're moving into an era that's all about proactivity with the communications that consistently feed to. So basically you can see if a part's not working before it actually stops working. So that's just the aspect of the company. We feel that they would deny us because of the risk of going into these countries.
That's my question.
Okay. So that's ultimately what we're saying. We don't feel it's the business model, we feel it's the place that we're doing business.
Can I get your thoughts, if you don't mind, on this whole proposition is based on low-cost airlines. Low-cost airlines are notoriously unreliable. They break down, they quit, they cancel, they leave their tourists stranded. How comfortable do you feel on building on that market share?
Actually, building on that market share, it's a very good market to build on. As the case has explained to us, is that this product and the actual black box product in and of itself has proven to decrease costs for airlines throughout the industry, and so we feel that if the low-cost airlines take on your even better version of the product, it'll be able to decrease their costs, allow them to expand faster, and give you more market share as you go forward.
FLYHT's losing money and looks to be in some financial weakness. Are you at all concerned that we're putting Granite at risk by spending a lot of time with a company that might not do so well in the future?
Well, FLYHT did, that would have been about a year ago, so in April 2015, they received funding to get them till then. They are in a deficit, but we feel because of the business relationship, how they give 100% ownership to us, it still keeps that distance. And so moving forward, it is something to keep in consideration, but we feel that the technology they provide to the table will increase that long-run gain.
Are you comfortable with all the aspects of the new revised FLYHT contract, including the service end?
Including the service end of...
The new proposal that you give to us, are you comfortable?
Absolutely. We feel that makes sense because FLYHT wants to minimize their risk too, and that's exactly why we designed the strategy, because the relationship that you have with them is important enough, and the money on the line, especially the fact that you've sunk $200,000 in already trying to get these contracts going. That's why we just wanted to make sure instead of abandoning it, we tried to mitigate the risk to move forward.
Two questions. Given that you've put the clause in to assess the legal risk, why not go for all three on the RFP? So quick response to that. And then secondly, can you say more about the long-term organizational structure that you think is going to be necessary to deliver the strategy?
So we did run the numbers. Burundi seems to be not such a good market to be doing business in, and I think the financial valuation was also not good. So we thought that the safest and the best bet would be the other two countries, so Oman and Angola. And in the long term, we do plan on building physical locations, but it all depends on how the first 6 months go. As I said in the timeline, the first 6 months are all about just kind of getting the ball rolling and then flying in executives initially, and then later on, once we know that we can do this, then we start to build physical locations and headquarters and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,